Attention listeners, ahead are spoilers.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I said this was a movie trap, you would agree. This is my friend and my partner, Chris Boroff.
How much? I'll drink your milkshake.
And this is my other friend and my partner, Zach Powers.
I have a competition in me.
Welcome to the Movie Trap. We today are right in the middle of my theme, which is the Make Your Case theme. How this is going to work is that basically one of us picks a theme, and then each of us picks a movie based on that theme. Once we've watched all three movies, we will then vote, and then whoever wins the vote, that host gets to pick the next theme. But this one's a little bit different because we've added a little bit of spice of gamesmanship to it. So it has been my theme of the Make Your Case. The idea being that you pick a movie that did not win Best Picture but was nominated, that it should have won Best Picture. So last time we watched Fargo, which definitely should have beaten English Patient. And how it's going to work is once we're done talking about it, we are then going to vote the person who didn't pick. So in this case, which is Zach's pick for There Will Be Blood, we are then going to vote if we agree, if Zach made his case well enough that There Will Be Blood should have won Best Picture over No Country for Old Men. If Chris and I both vote for No Country for Old Men, Zach's movie is disqualified from winning the theme. So he picked a tough one. He definitely made his. This is a tough one to sort of tightrope walk because There Will Be Blood, obviously a strong movie, and No Country for Old Men equally strong. This is going to come down
if
to
this is the first DQ, so be it.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to come down to either just taste or the most nitpicky of nitpicky things you can think of.
Yeah.
I was saying earlier.
These both came out when we were in film school, I think.
Exactly.
Carlson. So if anything, it's probably going to devolve into film school style arguments about mise-en-scène and the great arc of Paul Thomas Anderson's career and yada yada yada. But we'll see.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, this was kind of like we were wrapping up film school at the time. Like we were about to launch off into the great wide open or whatever. So like to have these two movies be like the kind of like these were the masterpieces. These were the Shangri-Las, the targets you wanted to get for. So yeah, I do. Obviously, I've got a personal connection to this movie. Zach, I know you do as well. But before we get into digging holes underground to chase bits of rock and melted compressed bone or whatever oil actually is, let's get a rundown of the points real quick because we are still having final voting. So Chris Boroff, as I said, we each get points that we vote on. Each of us has 10 points and then 3 bonus points. So Chris Boroff, you have 3 bonus points still to give out with 11 points for final voting. I have 2 bonus points to give out for 10 points for final voting. And Zach Powers, you have 2 bonus points to give out with 11 points for final voting as of now. So that brings us to the matter at hand. So let's just do a quick rundown of Paul Thomas Anderson's 2007 There Will Be Blood. Zach Powers, take it away.
Yeah, as mentioned, There Will Be Blood is a 2007 period drama kind of character study film, written and directed by Paul Thomas Anderson and loosely adapted by the novel Oil by Upton Sinclair. I hope you could hear that exclamation point on oil. It stars Daniel Day-Lewis, Paul Dano, and in his first and only film role, Dylan Frazier. The film opens in the late 1800s. We meet Daniel Plainview, who is in a self-dug hole, having just discovered some silver through some dynamite blasting. When his ladder collapses, he breaks his leg, climbs his ass out of that hole, drags himself through the desert to get treatment at a nearby town. A few years later, he is working on drilling for oil with a small team with some pretty rickety, roughshod looking equipment, pretty thrown together looking shit. They discover the oil, but one of the men dies, and Daniel elects to adopt his young baby. About 9-10 years later, Daniel has become kind of a fairly successful oil man. He is approached by Paul Sunday, who claims that he knows a town that has an abundance of oil just seeping out of the ground. And eventually, for $500, he reveals the name of the town is Little Boston. Daniel and now his adopted son, H.W., who believes he is his real son, is told he is his real son, all of this, go to Little Boston, where they pretend to be quail hunting, but in fact are searching for signs that there is indeed oil, and they discover, yes, there is oil. So they talk to Paul's father about potentially buying the land, but Paul's twin brother, Eli, intervenes and demands slightly higher prices. He's trying to lowball this father into thinking it's just quail hunting prices instead of oil prices. Eli demands more money, including $10,000 for his church. Eventually, an agreement is set, and Daniel begins quickly buying all of the land in Little Boston, though there is one man, William Bandy, who is unwilling to sell to Daniel unless he comes to meet with him. Daniel does not have a great deal of interest in doing so. Eli requests to bless the well prior to the drilling beginning, but Daniel once again pettily denies him the right, instead saying a quick prayer himself. Soon there is an accident that kills one of the workers in the night. Eli claims this is because he didn't allow him to bless the well, but when he confronts Daniel, he shoves his face in the oil and sort of slaps him around and humiliates him. As their tensions sort of boil over.
I think that happened before.
Oh, but
I think that happened after.
Right,
explosion.
but after the man is killed, there's also when they strike oil initially, sort of an explosion at the derricks that blows HW back and costs him his hearing before the oil lights a flame, shooting fire into the sky. But it is indeed their big payday. Like
it's your average sorcerer. That's what's going on.
Indeed.
Exactly. It is a very sorcerer. They blow the well to stop the burning. But yeah, it's a huge payday, but unfortunately HW is deafened in the discovery and the initial explosion. At that point, Eli confronts Daniel, and Daniel sort of shoves his face in the dirt and slaps him
Beats
around.
the crap out of him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And says one day he's going to bury him in the ground. Meanwhile, a man who says he is Daniel's half-brother, Henry, arrives on the scene. He says he is from the same town. They share the same father, but a different mother. And he has some documentation to sort of verify his story. And Daniel, feeling estranged from HW, who can no longer hear, obviously, and, limits his ability to communicate and such, takes to Henry as kind of his new main protege. The two of them drink and go out on the town. Daniel confesses to him that he has like a seething hatred inside of him for almost all people. Eventually, however, after they begin to work on setting up this pipeline, right, they are deciding instead of selling to one of the big oil companies, they're going to build their own pipeline to get the oil from Little Boston down to the coast in order to make considerably more money than if they just sold off the wells to Union or Standard or whatever it is. But in order to do this, they have to get a track through Bandy's ranch. Nonetheless, they begin to plot the pipeline, heading out to the coast little by little. One day at the beach, when they finally make it to the coast, they begin to reminisce about their childhood home, and Daniel becomes suspicious that Henry is an imposter. He doesn't seem to recognize certain references to their hometown. That night, he awakes Henry with a gun pointed in his face. Henry confesses that Daniel did have a half-brother that he knew, who died of tuberculosis and often talked of coming to meet Daniel, and says that he can just leave in the night. It's fine. He'll just go away. Daniel doesn't quite accept that and shoots him in the face and buries him in a shallow grave. The next morning, he is awoken by William Bandy, who seems to be aware that Daniel has committed a murder the night before, and says that if you want my land, my permission to build this pipeline through my land, then you have to come and be baptized at Eli's church. With no other option, Daniel goes to the church and is baptized by Eli, who slaps him, who accuses him of abandoning his son and various other, misdeeds. Daniel seems to be slightly humiliated and indeed break down under the guilt of having his son H.W. sent away on a train to go to a school for the deaf and function with no connection left pretty much to the boy at this point. But it does seem to work. He gets the land and the permission for the pipeline. And, it seems as though his big payday is secured. Eventually, H.W. is reunited with Daniel after he leaves the school for the deaf, but we jump forward about 16 years or so to 1927. Daniel is living in a gigantic mansion. He spends his days just shooting at the furniture and drinking. One day, H.W. comes by. He has married Eli's sister, Mary, and says that he's going out on his own to Mexico to start his own wells. And Daniel derides him as nothing more than the competition if he decides to do this, and no longer his son, revealing after many years that he was just an orphan he found one day and decided to take in as a cute face to buy land cheaply. It seems as though their relationship is permanently destroyed, and H.W. leaves to live his own life. Shortly thereafter, Daniel is visited in his private bowling alley by Eli. Eli has become a radio preacher, but has fallen on hard times with the Depression and offers to sell him the bandy track at a fairly high price, including the $10,000 he never got, plus interest. So if he gives him this, I think it's something like $100,000, he can suck up the great untapped bandy track. And Daniel agrees on the condition that Eli says that he's a false prophet and God is a superstition. After thoroughly humiliating Eli, Daniel reveals that the bandy tract is worthless. All the wells around it have sucked up all the oil that was underneath it. There's nothing there. He doesn't want it, and he's not going to pay him. After a moment, Daniel becomes increasingly unhinged during the course of this conversation and eventually begins to chase Eli around the bowling alley, throwing bowling balls at him, eventually grabbing a bowling pin and bludgeoning him to death before shouting to his butler, "I'm finished." And that is the end of the film.
It's quite a punchline.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty bleak, but this movie's, it's even shot kind of bleak, most of the movie takes place in like a barren sort of desert place where not a lot of vegetation is. So, it's a fitting ending.
Well, that's kind of one of the craziest things with this. Like, it's essentially just a drama about oil, but they shoot big portions of this like it's a horror film.
Exactly.
Like,
and God damn you.
Beyond
Gotta
that,
get a point.
Beyond that, the soundtrack sounds like a horror film.
Mm-hmm.
Precisely. I literally have that in my notes that like Johnny Greenwood's score sounds like a horror film.
Yeah. It's one difference between this and the other movie we'll be discussing is like No Country has no soundtrack almost at all, I think. Maybe there's like some diegetic music, but that's the extent of it.
Also like a horror movie. No Country is very much like a horror movie.
Most of the horror is more like character violence between like Daniel like losing his mind. The other one, No Country for Old Men, seems like the Anton Chigurh is just sort of, it's almost a slasher film. Like he keeps showing up and killing people.
Right. This is more like The Shining. This is more like a guy kind of going fucking nuts, right? But all the while, the atmosphere of the movie and the music and all the stuff is this kind of apocalyptic dread, like from opening frame of this movie it starts.
And I think it is in a regard like The Shining. The other kind of sort of film, and you don't see these as commonly today as you did a while ago, back in the mid 1900s, is those sprawling life story movies like It's a Wonderful Life, Citizen Kane, or what was all the King's Men. Like movies like that are kind of what this reminds me of. Like, it's the story of this man from fairly young until he is this wretched, stumbling alcoholic. And I also deeply enjoy how much he physically transforms. Like, in the first scene, he breaks his leg and he has this limp ever after. And by the end, his years of like alcoholism and difficult labor has turned him into this weird, hunched. The way he chases after Eli is like so inhuman. Like, he gradually descends into this less human looking monster as the movie and his decline progresses.
Yeah, no, he sort of like manifests to like, because I do think both No Country and There Will Be Blood like have a lot of like kind of metatextual stuff. Like the fact that Daniel Plainview's sort of transformation is, he is become this demon of avarice and envy. His antipathy towards Eli, I think, stems beyond just the personal grievances. I think he views him more or less as competition because, Daniel Plainview was a successful oil man, but he's more or less a bottom feeder in the grand scheme of things as far as oil is concerned, and this is his big break. And because he's a bottom feeder, it's a lot of labor and a lot of, you kind of said how hastily all this stuff's been made to go. I was listening to a Charlie Rose interview with Paul Thomas Anderson and Daniel Day-Lewis, and, they were talking about, like, from, like, a historian, they're like, look, they kind of just made this up as they went. Whatever worked to get the oil out, or, like, with the big explosion to do the sorcerer trick of dynamite, they're like, yeah, they kind of, there's more than one way to skin a cat when it comes to this stuff, because they were really just kind of figuring it out as they went along. And that's why both movies, No Country and There Will Be Blood, have this sort of apocalyptic tone to it, because it is the changing times that are coming to eat you.
Right. As we talk about them and the differences and similarities, like metatextual things, the theming of these movies, I think what the deeper meaning to me is probably where I'm going to make my stance that There Will Be Blood is overall stronger for me. Like, that's the place for me where the difference is made, where like where I think There Will Be Blood is the one that takes it, and I can explain more about that as we get into that. I don't know if we want to even start introducing No Country, because I do think it's going to be a much...
I mean, like, sure, and if we do too much Coen Brothers, Russell's just going to have an aneurysm of joy. Unlike Fargo and English Patient, I think it's probably going to serve this film, because even when this movie came out, we talked about it with the two being a pair. I mean, yeah, it almost seemed like there were two great movies that came out this year.
And these movies were filmed so close. They were filmed a few miles apart. Like, they're so close together that during the scene where they, had the big oil explosion and all the smoke was going into the sky, it disrupted filming for No Country for Old Men, because they were so close together. The smoke was ruining their shots.
I had no idea.
And it's
that
the
they were
Coen
that
brothers,
close.
so you knew it was a tight schedule, so they were pissed. No question. Easy for me. Yeah. Sure.
That is 100% I agree. This is his most Oscar-ish film.
Yeah, and it also kind of changed the trajectory of every later film after this, pretty much, and the Coens kind of went on the same way after No Country, didn't they? I mean, like, it does seem to kind of be, a fulcrum point for both of their careers, because, like, after this, Thomas Anderson kind of does The Master and Phantom Thread. He has the weird one with Inherent Vice. I haven't seen Licorice Pizza, but I've heard Licorice Pizza much more is on the Punch Drunk Love sort of vibe than
it's comedic and
right.
Largely very episodic, like, sort of.
Every film after this, like The Master especially, like is kind of dripping with this
Pretension.
self-importance. Yeah, right. Like it knows how serious it's taking itself. And even Inherent Vice, which I quite enjoyed, is still kind of a different vibe, but it's still like the Pynchon novel, so it's kind of got that level of seriousness to it. Whereas, before this, even Boogie Nights, like I didn't think Boogie Nights, and Magnolia too, because Magnolia gets off into the really weird and doesn't care.
Like, if we're going to compare them like that, I know that it's hindsight now, because we know that There Will Be Blood came out, and then we've seen his career since then. But since we know this is his best film, and he didn't win an Academy Award for it, would you say that No Country for Old Men is one of the Coen brothers' best movies? Because for me,
Easily.
I had a weird thing where I couldn't remember exactly how it played out until I watched it again. Whereas There Will Be Blood, I pretty much remembered the whole movie. And I'm not saying that makes one better than the other. I'm just saying that was an odd thing for me. Because if I had to think of a best Coen brothers movie, it would probably still be Fargo.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are worth talking about. Super quickly, I should probably... We did this for The English Patient, but we should probably do the 30-second There Will Be Blood rundown, just so people have context.
Yeah, this
if
one
they
will be
haven't seen
easy.
it.
Guy stumbles into drug thing, goes wrong, steals money. Even scarier guy kind of chases him throughout. Tommy Lee Jones is a cop chasing both of them. In the end, Josh Brolin doesn't make it, ends up getting killed by the cartel, who's also after the money. Chigger ends up with the money, and Tommy Lee Jones retires. The end. It also should be noted, like There Will Be Blood, also based off of a novel, though far closer to the adaptation of the novel.
To the degree that there are times where they are directly lifting dialogue from the novel.
When I read No Country for Old Men, which, by the way, it's a quick read by Cormac McCarthy. It's very worth your while. I read it because the Coen brothers were doing it, because I'm such a fanboy.
I listened to a little something on No Country for Old Men. And the Coens said when they were talking about writing the script for this, he said, well, it took both of us because one of us had to read the book and the other one had to write.
Right. You gotta, those guys, I swear to God. But even reading it, even when I read it before the movie came out, I'm like, oh, this is perfect for the Coen brothers, because there is a lot of like that whole scene with the mom in the backseat. You know how many people I know in El Paso? That's how many. That's straight from the book. And I'm like, okay, this is right up the Coen brothers' alley. But even...
Whereas oil is markedly different from their work.
Right, yeah. I mean,
I'm giving Zach a point, because I didn't know that quote. That's a funny quote. You got to laugh at me, so you get a point.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, no, and I think even bringing it back to Fargo a little bit, No Country is more or less in continuation of the kind of Fargo-ness that they're trying to do, but, in the Coen brothers sort of prism that they put their movies through. But with There Will Be Blood, Paul Thomas Anderson had never done anything like this before. Like, this is a whole new world for him. So, like, that's why I not only is it its best, I think it launched his career to a direction that I didn't anticipate. And, with varying degrees of success,
I do think that, like, No Country, I mean, it's an appropriate thing to talk about this week because it feels in many ways like a spiritual successor to Fargo. Like, I think there's a lot of commonalities between No Country and Fargo. Like, obviously both of these are like some people chasing the money. There's a cop who's like kind of the moral center of the thing, chasing him down, and like this kind of sociopathic figure. Yeah. Obviously Fargo's far more comedic. Even the empty settings, like all the desert settings versus the snow-covered tundras, like it's
for sure.
Very...
I mean, it's weird because it's set in like a frozen area, but Fargo feels way warmer to me than No Country for Old Men.
That's true, but it's not as desolate feeling. I mean, so much so. I mean, like, look, we just saw it. I mean, the briefcase that Josh Brolin finds the money in is literally the same briefcase that fucking Steve Buscemi buries. It's the same type of briefcase. So, I mean, and my argument is always, and this is just kind of like Russell, 3 a.m. up late at night, inebriated theories, that I think all of the Coen brother movies are in a shared universe, but that's a different podcast for a different day. But with There Will Be Blood, like it also is very desolate. Like I think that another way that these movies are so tight is, you know, Deacons won, I think, for No Country, but I could have just as easily given it to Robert Elswith for this movie. I mean, because this movie's shot awesome. I mean, I love the way it looks.
There's things that are there's like in the scene, and I think it's shot on film, and I think it shows at certain times. Like the scene where the derricks explodes and there's fire, they have like shots of the derricks, and you see that ring of light you get like only in certain filming styles, and I really enjoy that they decided to keep that in. I don't know, it just makes that shot so much more interesting to me.
Yeah, the anamorphic lens flare is like when you see it done with an actual anamorphic, it's very exciting. Like it's one of those things that like people have done fakery with, and it's like a very common editing trick now to throw that in. But when you see it done and you can tell that it's a legitimate lens doing what it's supposed to do, it's exciting. It has like a certain quality to it.
And also, I mean, this movie was shot on film, but I think both movies still went through the digital intermediate and were edited digitally. So, I mean, and this is another reason why, obviously, Borf and I were kind of excited to kind of get out of film school, because we have been learning all about, like, you know, Final Cut and fucking all that shit. I mean, now who gives a shit? But like, it's that it was still in its nascent form. I mean, you know, this is still like kind of before Avatar and everything kind of changing now. So this is kind of one of those movies where it kind of was the beginning of that. I mean, I know the Coen brothers kind of tinkered with it in Oh Brother, but they full on did it for No Country, and I think Paul Thomas Anderson did the same thing for There Will Be Blood, which again, this movie, There Will Be Blood, is one of the best movies of that era, of the aughts, no question. I think it's easily in the top 5, and any other year that movie would have come out, it would have won Best Picture, were it not up against another one of the greats of that era in No Country for Old Men. So like, this is where I think that There Will Be Blood, I sort of understand where you're coming from, Zach, with the metatextual themes that There Will Be Blood is delving into. You know, the title There Will Be Blood is all over it. It's blood of the earth, blood of God, blood of family, blood of man. Like it's all over it. And then you get into the end scene in the bowling alley, which is probably, you know, I mean, you talk to anybody who's seen this movie, this is the scene they pretty much remember.
It's the I drink your milkshake scene. Like this movie caused memes to occur, and it's mostly I drink your milkshake.
Yeah, and that's so weird to me, because the line that stuck out to me was when he's saying, "I am the third revelation.
I think that am
the true prophet." Like that's the line that matters to me.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, well, we can get into some of this, but I think, you know, like, I even have, I mentioned this in our chat, but like, I literally, in the office where we record, I have like the poster, the UK version of the poster for this movie up on the wall. And I think it's much more in line with what, the actual meaning of the film, which is like this, I mean, to me this is the movie that is, it's just the birth of kind of modern America, post-industrial America. Like, this is I think that's what it is meant to be about. Like, it's one charlatan, greedy monster being co-opted and bashed into oblivion by a new hunched monster. Like, that is ultimate. Like, you know, I mean, even at the beginning, there's HW is anointed with a cross in oil. Like, Eli, his power to control the power of like religion in America is decreased, and the power of capitalism increased, and also stealing and appropriating the symbology of religion to become the new god of this new 1900s America,
of the West. Yeah. And and you know, like, there's this notion of technology, right? I mean, like, I love the way There Will Be Blood, like, right before the explosion, they make the drilling of the oil itself almost blasphemous, you know, like, it's almost like this sort of like unholy ritual that's happening. And like the Coen brothers, God strikes back, you know, like, he comes back. so that's why and because what did you guys think of There Will Be Blood of the whole twin thing? Because like they sort of, it sort of sounded like they changed that almost last minute. They just liked Paul Dano so much that they sort of changed everything last minute.
The other actor who was supposed to play Eli quit about 4 days before he was supposed to.
One rehearsal with Daniel Day-Lewis, that'll do it.
I think it was indeed like it was like, I can't deal with this guy.
By the way, we should mention the HW, his son who had to act opposite of Daniel Day-Lewis. I cannot think of a more terrifying experience as that's your first job and you're just a kid, and you have to act across from, Mr. Intensity here.
I have to assume
and
that the kid was just
I read about this a little bit.
I mean, you could probably put more into it. I just have to imagine that the kid was just sitting there quiet most of the time, going like, "Okay, I'll just talk when they tell me to." I don't know.
I'm just saying, I'd have pissed my pants. Like, just all you got to do is like look at me, and I'll be like, ah.
This kid was just like, they literally looked for potential actors in the schools in the area where they were shooting, and found this kid. Like, he's not some kid who tried to have an acting career. Hasn't done a thing in acting since. I don't know. He said like before they started, like Daniel Day-Lewis sat him down and was like, "Listen, I'm gonna like maybe be, crazy or weird or like yelling at you, but it's all pretend," which is like, more than you usually expect maybe from the stories you hear from Daniel Day-Lewis.
From Daniel Day-Lewis, sure. And that's what I mean. Like, another reason why this movie is so great is, I think
it's maybe the best
Daniel
performance
Day-Lewis, right? I mean, and that's fucking saying something of Daniel Day-Lewis. Like, it's one of his best performances, and he's had a couple. So like here's where I've always said one of the knocks on this film. This film doesn't work if it isn't Daniel Day-Lewis. I think that Paul Thomas Anderson more or less let Daniel Day-Lewis be in the driving seat, and I understand that's the purpose of the movie. But if you didn't have that unearthly talent of Daniel Day-Lewis doing this movie, I'm not sure if it would work.
See, I don't know if that's true, because the first 15 minutes of this movie are silent. So you're dependent heavily on mostly the visual aspect of it. Like, I think the first thing he says is no. That's the first line that you actually have, and I think it's after he's been injured. Like, he finds himself at the bottom, and he, like, chokes and says no or something, which I think is a pretty standard reaction that somebody'd have if they just got into an accident. But, I think a lot of it earlier on, like, it's definitely the physicality of that performance. And sure, you might be like, I probably agree with you that Daniel Day-Lewis definitely fit this part. I'm not sure if nobody else could have played this part. There's actually another actor who was in this who's really...
Paul Dano. Yeah.
Well, no, not Paul Dano. Kieran Hines.
Yeah. I actually forgot he was in this movie until we watched it again. I forgot. Yeah,
me too. He's like one of my favorites. When he popped up, I was like, oh, hey, it's that fucking guy. And then I was like,
Belfast guy.
Yeah, he doesn't do a lot in this. At least his character doesn't do a lot. It seems like he himself is doing a lot to humanize everyone else around the main character, just because he's the only one who really seems to care about the kid. So you get the sense of, like, by comparison, in terms of like how that guy seems to be concerned with the kid's health versus how Daniel Plainview does not care. Like, it kind of lets you know
he's
the
like
cost.
his like sociopathy translator, kind of like he's this assistant whose job is to be like, I gotta make this guy seem somewhat like a human fucking being.
Yeah, and that's, so that's why, but you could just as easily say the same argument about Anton Chigurh with Javier Bardem. Like, part of the power of that movie is his performance, which, again, that's fair enough.
I agree, but I just think that I don't think it has anything on Lewis's performance in this. Like, the baptism scene alone, like, he goes through like 6 different modes in that scene very effectively, in my opinion.
There's very few movies, very few performances that could stand up to this performance, I think. And that's why I think that that's sort of like, it makes it
but
I don't know. It's like you're stacking the deck. You've already got Daniel Day-Lewis. You know, like it. I'd
argue,
you know.
But I think Plainview is still an interesting character beyond that. Like, I think the way that this guy does genuinely, in my opinion, try to at times hold on to some kind of humanity, and the way he like transforms between like these mental states, like part of that baptism scene is because that's how it was written. Like, I'm sure that like there are lines in that scene, like he breaks, he has the moments of real intentionality. There's moments where he like lets slip this mask of politeness and is like, I'm gonna find you wherever you are and I'm gonna slit your throat. Like his drunkenness, the way that he relates to HW and then Henry until Henry's fraud is revealed. Like, and I think both of those characters, for me, like I think the reason he does relate so strongly to them and rejects Henry and murders him so completely is because like this guy's a narcissist and he can mold HW into a version of himself, and Henry biologically has himself in him. And I think he has a complicated relationship with that because honestly, Eli has a lot of Daniel Plainview in it, and he's revulsed by it. Like,
yeah,
he despises it.
Yep. It's the famous line, "You are what you hate," you know,
yeah.
and that's why like I said earlier, I think Daniel Plainview's antipathy towards Eli goes beyond the personal insults or whatever. It is his existence alone, a little too close to my existence. So this town ain't big enough for the two of us. And that's where I sort of like that thematic battle of business and religion, and they're both just knowingly fraudulent. And you know, it's really because like that's why I'm not sure if I agree with you that Daniel Plainview has humanity. He more or less uses it as a way to charm to get what he wants. Once he gets what he wants, he pretty much discards it completely, and never needed it to begin with.
Because it never fills the hole.
Yeah.
No. Well, I don't know. Like, he even says, I can't... There's that speech where he talks about how he hates most people, and he's like, I can't keep doing this on my own. I think the physical like I mentioned how at the end he's transformed and mangled into this monster. Even at the beginning, like there's a scene after he decides to adopt HW where they are on a train, and it's a silent scene. It's before the dialogue starts. And there's a moment of genuine, gentle connection between them that, like, why would he be faking that? For no audience.
Yeah.
And there's
fair.
the moments in the baptism, right? When he shouts, I've abandoned my boy, there's real grief in that. Like, he's not strictly sociopathic. Like, when he gets back to, like, do you accept... One of my favorite funny lines of the movie is, like, when he's like, do you accept Christ as your Lord and Savior? And he has this very flat, like, yes, I do. but the, like, abandon my boy part, like, that's a break. Like, he's having some degree of guilt over what he's done to HW.
Sure,
well,
but it is also pride, you know.
Yeah,
it's the humiliation and the degradation of his own statue of how he views himself.
That's kind of what played with me too. Like, because when I watched that scene, I don't know if I read it. You can read it multiple ways, I think, depending on kind of what you see Daniel as at the time. Because for me, when I saw it, like, it kind of stuck out that it was mostly he was angry. He was like furious. So like his, gesticulations and loud proclaiming of how he abandoned his child, like he was saying it, and it seemed like he was saying it out of rage more than sadness. Like it wasn't a mea culpa. It was like someone screaming, "I'm going to burn this whole house down," type energy. At least as far as I got it.
I think it's very possible that it's both. I mean, that grief is still kind of around him, but I think he's grieving his own image of himself to have to be on his knees, get slapped around by this little pissant. I think that might play into it too, but I do think that it's not about affection for the boy; it's about appearance of affection for the boy. Like even when he finally goes off, when the kid marries Eli's little sister and wants to go off to Mexico, Daniel Plainview doesn't grieve this. He's like, well, now I get
at
to
that point,
kill you.
he's
yeah.
far beyond.
Well, because he's already won, right? When you see it at the end of the movie, that's the Lion in Winter, right? He's gone to seed. He's done, and that's what it's done to his body, is that, because he wasn't Standard Oil or Rockefeller or whatever, he had literally had to work his ass off to build that giant palace that he lives in. And now he's just going to live in that palace, but he's lived such a primitive, savage life for most of his life that it's not really all that much of a comfort to him. So his only comfort really is sticking it to other people.
Yeah, that probably exemplified in him shooting his own furniture, because he doesn't really care about any of the things he has. It's just the hunger and the chase was the only thing that kept him going, and now that he doesn't really have anything to chase anymore, it's just, what's he gonna do? So he just ends up killing somebody.
Yeah, and I think that it's there's a moment at the end that I think underlies that, right? When Eli discovers him, he is drunk, asleep in one of the lanes of the bowling alley. And Eli starts screaming various things to wake him up. He's like, your house is on fire. Wake up, your house is on fire. And then the thing that actually gets him to wake up is when he very quietly says, it's Eli. And then he immediately wakes up.
Yeah.
Because this is what he's been waiting for. Like, the thing he wanted is to crush this man.
That's right.
Like, to crush people. Like, that is what he lives for. The stuff, like, and he says he, like, also wants to get away from everybody, and I believe that's partially true, but, like, in his heart, like a good capitalist, the things he loves the most is pushing someone under his boot and crushing. I think that's the thing that gets him up, and, like, when he gets to the top, it's like, dull, I don't have anybody to crush anymore.
Thank you. You came right into the lion's jaw. All I have to do is close.
That's why he says, I'm done.
Yep.
Or I'm finished.
Yeah. Yeah. So, this movie is amazing. But since we're going to be on the theme of making your case, and I really did, Zach, I tortured myself over trying to think about, like, because even at the time, I still probably gave it to No Country. And here's my reasoning for that still. And not really 100% still, because I really don't know. What I like about No Country is that this is a different kind of movie for Paul Thomas Anderson to do, where There Will Be Blood. But as you said, like, this is almost like a Fargo postscript. So it is interesting to see filmmakers like the Coen brothers elevate their own form of storytelling and perfect it. Whereas I think Paul Thomas Anderson with There Will Be Blood was trying to make this movie more timeless and, like you say, make it more like, Treasure Sierra Madre and shit like that. Like, you could see this movie being made in the 50s. Probably not as graphic, but, general type of story of, a man realizing what he actually is. Though, again, both movies are pretty bleak and touch on that theme a little bit, at least with Tommy Lee Jones's character. Not so much with Anton Chigurh, because Anton Chigurh isn't really a character. He's not really a person. He's an agent.
Force,
he's a wraith. He just kind of pops in, kills people, and then leaves.
Yeah, there's in the first 2 pages of the book, because the book it has Tommy Lee Jones's narration throughout of it. It keeps cutting back because the book's written that way. You cut in each chapter is like Anton, Llewellyn Moss, and then Ed Tom Bell. Those are the 3 characters you pretty much follow, and they don't meet at all, which I think is kind of bold to do. Like they keep dragging you along and spinning you along and spinning you along, and it never actually happens. I think that's an interesting choice. Because my little brother fucking hated this movie. He hated No Country. He will never forgive me for recommending this movie for, because he
there are certain people who really despise. Well, I remember there were people at the time who really despised this movie. One of their biggest complaints was that Josh Brolin's character dies off screen without ceremony. And some people really hated that. To be clear, am not a hater of No Country. Like, this is legitimately such a fucking difficult matchup.
I know it. Yeah,
I'm not a No Country hater. I think it's a great movie.
Again, this is one of those instances I would love to see the vote tally on this for the best picture, because it's got to be tight between these two. I got to think, because like the other competition was Michael Clayton, Juno, and Atonement. All three of those movies are varying on not that good to pretty much forgettable. Like, I don't even remember Michael Clayton. I remember a car blowing up. That's about it.
I don't
Juno,
really remember what Atonement's about. I just assume that people are trying
Atonement
to get
was
over
fine.
something.
It was fine. No, Atonement was fine.
Juno was
just
not the baby. Yeah.
Yeah, Juno was overrated, and don't understand why everybody drooled over that movie.
It's funny when you mention the thing about the three characters that never meet up. I've seen another film that does that. I don't know if that's a super common... I don't think that's a common structural device. No. But I saw another film made by a troublesome director called Dust Devil. It's a pretty good horror film, but it essentially kind of like does the same thing where these
Isn't that
characters...
Stanley?
It's Richard Stanley.
Okay.
But it's odd because all these characters get involved in trying to hunt each other down, and it sort of works almost like a spiral. Like the characters keep getting closer and closer together because it's one person chasing another person chasing another person, and it keeps getting faster and faster and faster in between the scenes, but then they all meet at the end. So that was what I was thinking might happen here, but then it goes a completely different direction.
Because I think No Country, how I kind of read the three characters is that Ed Tom Bell, Tommy Lee Jones's character, is the past. Llewellyn Moss, Josh Brolin's character, is the present, and Anton Chigurh, Javier Bardem, is the future. You can slow down the future. You might even be able to escape it for a second, but it finds you, and it will eat you and destroy you. Because even at the beginning scene, like how Llewellyn Moss gets his money is he pulls it out of a pile of bodies, basically. That's how he gets his money. Nothing. Yeah. And Ed Tom Bell comes
an
across...
RPG looter.
Right.
It's like taking everybody's boots.
There you go. Meanwhile, Tommy Lee Jones's character comes across it much, much later on horseback. You know, everything about, and the way Anton Chigurh is hunting the money is he has this device, which, you know, the movie takes place in 1980. That's what I like about both movies. Both movies, even though they take place in the past, have this sort of like end of the world vibe to them, in both of their presentation and atmosphere. So Anton Chigurh's, what is the story arc of No Country for Old Men? It is Tommy Lee Jones's story arc. It's him, the No Country for Old Men. Does it work? I don't know. It certainly worked in the book, and the Coen brothers did their ever-loving best, I think, to cram that sort of theme in there. But did it land for everybody? Obviously not. But it had landed with enough Academy voters, I suppose. But you could also say, and this is the cynic in me, that they tilted it more towards No Country to make up for Fargo and English Patient to more like apologize for maybe going for the English Patient over Fargo, because the Academy would never do anything like that. They never make apology Oscars or anything. So yeah, Zach, you really did make your work cut out for you, because like I said, I do think that when it comes to these two movies, it is really a matter of taste.
It's tough. And you know, on the subject of 2007, another movie that didn't get a nom for Best Picture, and probably I think a lot of people I see more and more as the years go by, people saying this director's best movie ever is Zodiac, which didn't even get the nomination for Best Picture, and I think has kind of come to be, among certain film circles, be a bit of a classic in its own right. Which, I mean, 2007 could have been maybe the toughest year for Best Picture nominees ever.
I think that just kind of reveals the fact that it's mostly marketing push. Like, I think that if they'd had more money behind Zodiac, or if it had caused the same sort of zeitgeist explosion as Fight Club, they probably would have given it more attention than they did.
And I think both There Will Be Blood and No Country are Miramax, so we can't even disqualify them on that regards, because they're even, and both of them, I think both are Scott Rudin too, who's another prince of a man. You know,
you mean a movie like There Will Be Blood and No Country for Old Men didn't have nice people involved in every aspect of it, but they seem like uplifting movies, Carlson.
Yeah. I mean, by all respect, the Coen brothers and Paul Thomas Anderson. I mean, I know Daniel Day-Lewis is intense, but that you can't argue with the output. Like I know that probably being on set with him has got to be something short of gauging between a headache and a nightmare, but can't argue with the result. I can't argue with the result. So whatever you got to do to get there.
Ideally, you'll get him in a movie where he's playing like Abraham Lincoln and he's a nice guy.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
But you have to deal with him when he's Daniel Plainview or Bill the Butcher. It's like Jesus Christ.
Yeah, right. Or even like the Phantom Thread, he's just like this soft.
He's still an asshole.
Like where but even that, he's not going to scream at you. At least he's gonna.
Yeah.
He'll
take his little jibes.
Well, we've talked around it, but now we probably should have you guys make a determination. What do you feel is the best movie?
Well, Zach already made his call. He's made his shot. For
and I do think that like for me partially like I say, I'm a fan of The Wire's big old classic. Love that show so much, and to me like the sociological underpinnings, the sort of like changing of the tide in America stuff, like that aspect is something that resonates much more heavily with me than No Country for Old Men's great. I think people almost overestimate how complex it is. Like this is a movie like about the nihilism of the universe, right? Anton Chigurh is, like we said, he's not a character. He's constantly, he like is compared to a tool. He's talking about how the coin and him got here the same way, this element of chance. He is not a person who kills necessarily even with prejudice. He is simply a tide that comes, like, for everybody eventually. He is a grim reaper who is not focused. The money doesn't appeal to him. I think, the closest we get is like he has a little bit of a special hate for Llewellyn because he gets blood on his boots, but like it is fundamentally the story that ends with this dream. People talk about the dream a lot, right? And it's Ed Tom Bell looking back on his life. He's retired now and he has a couple dreams, one about his father giving him money and he loses the money, and that could be about regrets for what you failing to solve this case or whatever you could say. But the more important one is about his father going ahead of him and lighting a fire and leaving Tom to continue through this dark valley. And before he reaches his father, he wakes up. And it's this just ultimately philosophical idea of like, this is a cold, nihilistic universe. Maybe you have the dream of some afterlife where warmth is waiting for you, or maybe you don't. Maybe you just wake the fuck up and that hope is nothing. And I think it's a great metaphor for that. But I also think it's a fairly like that theme does not by itself compel me as much as this parable for the birth of modern capitalist America. I think that's ultimately, and I can't deny that, like, obviously the performance of Daniel Day-Lewis, I think in a lot of regards, these are both exceptional pictures. They're well shot. They're beautiful to look at. I think, the character of Plainview is, I think both the character and the performance are like some of the you could make an argument for the best character of this century so far, for I think both the performance and the character, in my personal opinion. And Anton Chigurh is fascinating in that sort of Joker from the Dark Knight way, as this ideological force. But he is ultimately not a human being.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's weird too, because in the novel, I mean, Cormac McCarthy gives Anton Chigurh a lot more stuff to do. Like, he actually ends up with the money and like negotiates it out and stuff like that. But one of the things I like about No Country, and this is where I think I'm gonna have to stick with, as much as I hate to do it, because, and this is stupid, because, like, honestly, I'm gonna give it to No Country.
Before you say it,
okay.
I fully acknowledged when I started this, when I rolled that dice and got this. I mean, the dice got here the same way I did, right?
Yeah.
Like, I was like, ultimately, if they both pick No Country, I will be like, yeah, that's totally valid. Like, there is this is not English Patient versus Fargo. This is not like Crash versus whatever Crash was up against.
Right.
Yeah.
This is like, I mean, I get it. I get why you prefer that movie.
Sure, no, and I too get why you would prefer There Will Be Blood over No Country for Old Men. That is even at the time, like I said, I'm never going to get into a fist fight about these two movies because both are valid, and hell, it should have been a tie. It really should have. That's why I want to see the vinyl numbers, because, I'll bet it was close. So for me, if I'm just going off of the two metrics I put in the last episode, which is longevity and viewing experience, I think longevity, I'm going to give it a push for both of them. I think both have equal amount. Although our mutual friend sort of shared us this tweet about like Daniel Plainview is the millennial version of Austin Powers.
Everybody has an impression.
Yeah, everyone has an impression.
I think it's Daniel Plainview. I argue also Bane from The Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah, sure. That's up there.
Everybody's got their Bane.
Right, yeah. There's not too many impressions of Anton Chigurh out there because he really doesn't say much. It's really all about... You gotta do the friendo thing, I guess. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right, friendo, it's call it, I don't want to underplay Javier Bardem's performance.
He is great. He is great. He is, like, his little, like, choke when the man at the gas station is like, when he finds out the man at the gas station married into it, he's like, you're married into it.
Right,
like, right. It's really good. It's a great performance.
It is. And because that's almost a more difficult performance, I think, to pull off than because Plainview's so realized and the movie goes through you and you can chart his journey. There is nothing out there for Chigurh. But yet there is this spark of what makes it, because if Daniel Plainview was just Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees or whatever, it wouldn't be as good. What made No Country work is that Anton Chigurh is a real person. Because there are people like Anton Chigurhs out there who are just relentless, cold-blooded psychopathic killers that's what makes it work. And what makes it, I think, even more scary is that Chigurh could be anybody. So
I think, there are people like Daniel Plainview out there too. These narcissistic rageaholics.
Right. Yeah, right. One of them's trying to buy Twitter. It's... Yeah. So I think that...
one of them was the president for a while.
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm. Well, fuck off. That motherfucker never did anything.
He doesn't have
never swung a hammer.
If that man fell in a hole, and this is true of Elon Musk too, honestly, he would just die in the hole.
Yeah, that's right.
At least Daniel Daniel Plainview will drag himself through a fucking desert.
Right. Yeah.
And he will wait for a motherfucker.
Wow.
So anyway, I just wanted to make that about. So again, if I'm just going off of viewing experience and longevity, I would say probably both have enough longevity because, like I said, both movies are kind of fulcrum points for both directors' careers, in my opinion. Because after No Country, there was True Grit, Ballad of Buster Scruggs. They kind of went on the No Country track a little bit, and even Macbeth a little bit, but not much. I think so. Then I have to go down to viewing experience. And while both movies are extremely enjoyable to watch, I think I gotta give it to No Country still because it is more of like a ride. It is more of like, okay, I'm just gonna go along with the journey. There's not a lot that I have to go along with other than the just sheer terror of getting away. The cat and mouse game is a little bit more of an enjoyable experience than a prolonged character study for me. Again, this is just a taste thing. And again, it's hard for me to vote against.
There's those sequences where Chigurh is chasing Brolin and the little actions every character takes that are so smart and intelligent. Like they're both acting in a really thoughtful, trying to keep one step ahead kind of way. And it's they're excellently applauded action scenes. There Will Be Blood doesn't really do action scenes. The violence is a little more grounded and sudden. But yeah.
Both have Deus Ex Machina kind of happen, like with Chigurh at the end with the car crash, and then even the explosion where shit just happens.
Yeah.
with No Country, it happens right at the end and only to Anton Chigurh. And that sort of shows that, like, to me,
Well, yeah.
that car crash scene, to me, even God can't stop him. Like, there is nothing that he can slow him down, but he's coming, you know. So I think I got to give it to No Country. Borif,
Well,
Zach's fate is in your hands.
I guess I got to be the tiebreaker on this one. So in between There Will Be Blood and No Country for Old Men, like on the one side, it doesn't feel like these came out in 2007. They feel very recent. So much so that when I looked it up and saw that it was 2007, I felt like I had suddenly lost time in my head that I couldn't account for. But I guess this was the thing that kind of gave us Josh Brolin as a dramatic leading man, because before this, he didn't really do that, and then after this, you know, he's Thanos. So
Same with Bardem, too.
yeah, they got way more well known. And
Yeah, I mean, this was Bardem, like, this was like his breakout role by, like, no one knew who he was before.
well, he'd done like art pieces, but nothing. I don't think he had done anything that was a leading man like this. Like he'd done like Midnight Falls or something.
Like, this is for him what Hans Landa was for Christoph Waltz the year after.
Yeah.
Wow, the year after. So the weird thing
Might have been
in
2
this-
years.
I mean, it's fine. I'm old and dying. So the There Will Be Blood. The thing in that always got me is the fact that the twins always look so much alike. So it always felt like sort of a dangling Chad, a sore thumb sticking out, because I didn't understand the choice, and it always confused me more than anything else in the film. However, with all of that said, even though we might be able to like argue, you know, if something's objectively better or not, I have to just go with what I think and my opinion on it, which is completely unfair and unfounded and very much in line with the Academy Awards because it's often a popularity contest that has F all to do with the actual quality of what's put out there and a lot more to do with the marketing push that's put out there. So I think on this one, I am actually going to say that I think There Will Be Blood is a better film. And it's totally personal, and it is totally unfair, and it is totally because I liked how much the beginning of There Will Be Blood feels like a horror film. It tips into 2001's first 20 minutes to me, where it has the silent opening that gives you the sense of impending dread and horror. And
I would argue the last shot of, like, I'm done now, and then it cuts to the classical music. Vintage Kubrick. Vintage Kubrick.
Yeah. You could tell that he's cribbing. Yeah, I mean, it's unfair, but I feel like I can't disqualify it in this case. I think There Will Be Blood is a better film, solely based off that and the fact that I can remember it. Like, if I'm thinking about how I connect with a movie, for some reason, Daniel Plainview killing people down in the oil derrick wells, I can remember more easily than Josh Brolin trying to bring a guy a gallon of water. Just for some reason, the dark,
Ain't no Lobos.
Yeah, the dark evil of There Will Be Blood sticks out with me more than the nihilistic evil in No Country for Old Men.
Did we get a definitive answer? So, and I think I also get an extra point for Chris's. Is that not correct? Is that not how this round works?
Yeah.
I don't get Russell's extra point, but I get Chris's. And I'm not disqualified, so that's good. But did we ever get a definitive answer for Chris? He asked, "Do you prefer No Country or Fargo?" Did we ever say each of us?
Man, I mean, I'll probably give it to Fargo as far as a personal taste. But I mean, No Country's in their top 5, no question. I mean, think that, okay, it's not my favorite. No Country's not my favorite Coen Brother movie, but it might be their best. It might be. I think if you were to try to crib it out of what would be the top 5, I would be. And by the way, Zach, I mean, not for nothing, I chose No Country for Old Men, but I mean, if it came down to it, I would say these movies are so close together that it doesn't warrant a disqualification. Because
I think
close.
I was more than willing to follow the strict. Like,
Sure,
if you guys,
you're a good sport. I'm just saying, for me, I couldn't.
It'd be fun for the podcast to have a DQ.
That's true. But I can't, in good conscience, disqualify There Will Be Blood because it's just too good. And had this movie come out any other year, I think it probably would have won Best Picture, were it not up against the Coen brothers. And like I said, I think maybe the Academy is like, sorry about the English Patient. That's the cynic in me.
Well, I'll say for me, and I'll let Chris answer this last, between Fargo and No Country, I guess there's a bit of a coin flip. I think most of the time I would say Fargo. Fargo has a stronger Coen feel to me than No Country overall and handles similar themes. So I think generally speaking, I'd be like, yeah, I think maybe this is slightly more my wheelhouse. But again, No Country is spectacular.
It's a Cormac McCarthy novel, and they're putting it through the Coen brother meat grinder, Exactly. So it's coming out as Coen brother sausage. So that's what I kind of agree with you, whereas Fargo's just like raw Coen brother in the raw, it's just like there's no other thing other than them. Whereas Cormac McCarthy, they do had to be in parameters, which again, for both of them, this is both of their first like kind of actual adaptation.
Chris, which did you prefer between those two?
I mean, I'll still say that my favorite Coen Brothers movie is Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? But
and for me, it's Barton Fink. So
yeah, but that's a good one too.
That's an excellent movie.
In terms of these, it almost feels like No Country for Old Men is 3 short films that have been edited together, and Fargo is a solid narrative that kind of runs through it. Like, it has the initial prologue on that, but then the rest of it's essentially a storyline of the pregnant sheriff trying to solve that crime. So I think it becomes a much more straightforward whodunit narrative. No Country for Old Men feels like it's more of almost an art piece. Like there's a lot of formalistic things kind of put in there that aren't really just part of the narrative. It's like we're not going to have the 3 characters ever meet. They'll be chasing the same things.
Very confusing. There's that interesting shot where like the sheriff Ed Tom like goes to the hotel door and you see Shiger on the other side and he goes inside and Shiger's not there. And it's like this lie of editing.
He's next door. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's
next door. It's the coin flip. He had a choice between one door or the other. He chose the right door. So and that's one of my favorite lines in the movie is right at the end with Anton Chigurh like kills a mob boss or whatever, and the guy's like, "Are you gonna kill me?" And he says, "That depends. Can you see me?"
But yeah. I'm glad that we all came down on Fargo over No Country because that'll make the voting more interesting. Because
that's true. That's true.
If we all like No Country more and There Will Be Blood already beat it, I think that would be telling.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So okay. Well, that was There Will Be Blood. Which again, tough category. You did not make.
Stick around, listener. After Chris picks, I'll reveal what my other choices for this category were, just in case the listener is curious what could have been.
Great. Okay, so before we get onto Chris's theme, which again, knowing Borif and these kind of themes, I can't wait. Okay, Chris Borif, you got a point from me because of the horror movie trope. And Zach, you got 2 points. One from Chris for picking it, and one from Chris for picking up on Daniel Plainview's sort of decrepitation throughout it. I think that was what the point was for. I didn't get a chance to write it down. Okay,
it's for something.
Yeah, so puts Borif at 12, me at 10, and you at 12. Oh, you at 13, Zach.
Okay. I still have 2 to give out, so I forgot to give any at this round.
Yeah, and Chris, you have 2, and I've got 1 bonus point to give out still. Okay, so Chris Borif, what case are you going to make?
Okay, so I decided to go back a little bit. Like, one of the things that was tricky on this is that we pick out recent movies, and there were a lot of them that jumped out where I was tempted, like Double Indemnity I was tempted by because it's an older one. However,
and that was a travesty. That's an injustice that the Academy will never get over.
Yeah, But in this case, I decided to go with one of my first times feeling as though something unfair had happened at the Academy Awards. And this was when I was a very young child. In 1979, the Academy Awards came out, and Kramer versus Kramer won the Academy Award for Best Picture. My argument is that Kramer versus Kramer is garbage. Now, the other film that should have won was Breaking Away.
Oh.
I think Breaking Away absolutely should have won. And we'll go into the whole thing of it. Just a couple things to say. It's an Indiana set movie where I recognized a lot of the locations. It's realistic to the location because the cultural problems they go into in that film are things that actually were happening at the time. And for me, this came out the year I was born, and I've just always loved this movie.
You've had a chip on your shoulder ever since.
I have. Dennis Quaid was cool in it. It's got Daniel Stern in it. It's got Dennis Christopher in it, who's a guy who didn't star as the lead in a lot of other stuff. Most people remember him for a fairly small part in the TV show It, when he's the guy who sprays his inhaler at the big It monster at the end. But it also gave us Jackie Earl Haley.
Oh.
And it's got Paul
Is
Dooley
this
in this.
pre Bad News Bear? Wasn't he in the original Bad News Bears?
He might have been in that. This is after. Like, this is everyone's like in their 19s, 20s in this. Shot all around Indiana. It's based off a true story. And I think we're gonna love it.
I am excited because I have not seen this movie, so and it's been a minute since I've seen Kramer versus Kramer. I'm probably inclined to agree with you, but I think I just get the sense of why you fucking hate this movie.
Well,
I think I could probably pick why Borif doesn't like Kramer versus Kramer. I could only guess. But no, I'm excited because I'd never seen it. So great. I was excited because both these movies, all four of the movies we've done in this theme so far, are movies that I'm either extremely familiar with or like a movie that I remember but really couldn't give a shit about. So, but at least these are movies I haven't seen in a minute, or at least I've never seen Breaking Away.
Would you guys like to quickly hear what what the could have beens were?
Yes.
By all means.
Well, if I had rolled a 1, and this was my double blind one, but I had on good authority that it would be a correct assumption. High Noon should have been the greatest show on earth.
Indeed. Another injustice.
Number 2 was Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf should have beat A Man for All Seasons.
Don't know if I'd agree with you on that one there. Not sure about that. But
Well, that would have been a tough one too then. Number 3, Network should have beat Rocky. That's also a tough one for a lot of people. But for me, that is true.
It's an easy one for me too.
Number 4, Kramer versus Kramer should have lost to Apocalypse Now, which I think is Francis Ford Coppola's actual best movie.
Yeah.
I have not seen Breaking Away, so we'll see.
That's funny.
Zach might come at this with a different case here.
Yeah, that's funny because I saw you light up when I said Kramer versus Kramer, and then when I said Breaking Away, you seemed so surprised. Yeah.
Yeah, I have not seen Breaking Away, so we'll see how that goes. And then this one would have just been a fun watch. It's not the kind of movie that they allow to win, but you know what? Mad Max Fury Road is better than Spotlight.
Yes.
And it was nominated, and I completely agree with you.
Yeah,
1,000%. All movies pale to Mad Max Fury Road. That movie is one of the best of the 2010s, I would say.
Yeah, so that's what could have been.
And it's another movie that my little brother fucking hated. So there's a trend there. He hated it.
We gotta pick out. I think one of these we need to have it be movies that your brother hated, and we need to force him to be on so we can talk about why he hated them.
I was on the phone with Brandon about Mad Max Fury Road for like 3 hours arguing with him about Mad Max Fury Road. We do not want to open this can of worms again. It will be we will be here all day. We will be here all day. Okay, so that was fun. This theme is turning out exactly as I anticipated. So I'm excited to do Breaking Away, and especially since Zach's got a ringer to throw in maybe in the case about Kramer versus Kramer. So join us next time for Breaking Away. I have been Russell Carlson, and I have been joined by my partner, Chris Boroff.
I drink your... Wait, you already said that one at the start. I can't steal. I drink your milkshake. Oh, well.
You said it at the start.
Did I say it at the start? I thought that...
You did.
How much have you lost on a coin toss?
There you go. Good enough. And I've also been joined by my other friend and partner, Zach Powers.
I'm gonna bury you in the ground, Russell.
I am the third revelation. I am the true prophet. Alrighty. Well, thank you very much for joining us. And as we always say on the Movie Trap, Diane Ladd is too young to play Chevy Chase's mom.
Movie Trap promise.
It is. We'll see you later, folks.